Tonight we go deep. 3 caving stories that start with confidence and end in chaos. 1 wrong turn, 1 missed warning, 1 moment underground where everything falls apart. Viewer discretion is advised. Eagle's Nest is the deadliest cave in America, and the sign at the bottom of its entrance shaft says so in engraved letters that the moss keeps trying to soften. On November 9th, 2013, Dario Vance and Cole Whitaker read that sign on the way down, the way they had read it 30 times before. They had dived as a pair for 11 years. Dario, 36 years old, precise and quick. Cole, 39, slower and stronger, the one who carried the heavy bottles without being asked. Between them, they had logged over 900 cave dives. Their wives joked that each man breathed better underwater with the other one in sight. And like most old jokes, it was simply true. Eagle's Nest opens as a modest green pond in a Florida wildlife park and falls away beneath it like a missing floor. A chimney dropping toward rooms 90 meters down, 300 feet, where air itself turns against the human brain. The plan that morning was their anniversary dive. The main ballroom at 55 meters, 80 minutes door to door, thirds on every tank. The descent ran like the previous 30. They dropped through the chimney's green column, lights crossing below them, and leveled into the ballroom, where the floor rolls away in dunes of pale silt. For 20 easy minutes, they flew the room's perimeter, unhurried, 2 beams stitching the biggest room in Florida. Cole ran the line while Dario ran the numbers, and everything came in on plan. Depth on target, gas on schedule, trim so clean their bubbles rose in twin silver ropes. It was, both would agree, the best anniversary lap they had ever swum. At minute 26, right on schedule, Dario signaled the turn, and that is the moment the dive stopped being routine. He drew a breath that ended early, a half breath, like a sentence cut off, because his first stage had failed. With the flat, metallic hiss divers rehearse in their sleep, over a frozen O-ring the size of a wedding band that chose 55 meters to quit. His backup regulator clicked, gave him 4 good breaths, and then breathed bubbles at him with a wet crackle. Not a leak, but a cascade. The failure had moved upstream, and his whole left post was going down with it. At 55 meters, every minute of exit costs 4 times the gas it costs at the surface. Because the failure had eaten both his posts, the arithmetic finished fast. The gas ran out. Water taste. 1 option left. He slashed a hand across his throat in the beam of Cole's light, and 11 years of joke became procedure. Cole was there in 3 fin strokes, pressing his long hose regulator into Dario's mouth with a scrape of steel on teeth, holding his friend's head the way you hold something you refuse to lose. Now the mathematics turned honest, and honest was ugly. 1 breathing system, 2 sets of lungs, 40 minutes of cave between them and the sky. The gas was planned for 1 man plus reserve, and stress breathing burns a third more. Every number they had ever trusted now had to be divided by 2. They exited as 1 animal, with 4 legs and 1 mouth. Dario on the long hose in front, Cole on his necklace regulator behind, tethered by 2 meters of rubber and 11 years. Then it got worse. At the chimney's base, the line turned upward, and climbing burns gas faster than swimming, and Cole's gauge began a dying countdown in the dark that neither man could watch and both could feel. Halfway up the chimney, the strangest thing, sunlight. It arrived early, falling 90 feet down the shaft in 1 green-gold column, drifting with motes like a cathedral window. Calm, lovely, indifferent. And both men swam up the middle of that soft, glowing light, while sharing single breaths of it. Cole would say later, it was the most beautiful thing he never wanted to see again. At 15 meters, the regulator went stiff between them, the drowning arithmetic arriving at last. The tank was emptying toward suffocation. 2 breaths each, then 1. Dario passed the hose back and refused it once, and Cole shoved it back with a force that left a bruise, because there are arguments you settle with your hands. They skipped half their decompression because the math left no choice, and hung the last stop at 3 meters, passing the hose back and forth on a 2-breath rhythm, watching the pond's underside shiver above them like a lid about to open. They surfaced together at minute 68, into ordinary Florida light and birdsong, and floated on their backs, breathing air that cost nothing. A park volunteer said the 2 men lay there 10 minutes without one word. Both men survived. A chamber ride and a bruised jaw settled the bill. The regulator that failed went to a workshop bench, and its frozen O-ring, 11 millimeters of rubber worth 40 cents, sits in a jar Cole keeps as a paperweight. Eagle's Nest is still the deadliest cave in America, and the sign at the bottom of the shaft still makes its engraved argument. Dario and Cole still dive it every November. They carry doubled everything now, and between them, unspoken, the only number that ever mattered down there. 1 breath, passed hand to hand, 400 times. On the morning of March 3rd, 2019, Ren Alder walked into the longest cave on Earth, carrying light for 12 hours, and Mammoth Cave kept her for 61. The cave's cold sits at 12 degrees and never moves. Hypothermia does its bookkeeping by the hour, and the stone that decided everything was smaller than a loaf of bread. Ren was 44 years old, a survey volunteer who had mapped passages under Kentucky nearly every weekend for 9 years. Her husband, Tomas, drew her maps into clean ink. Her daughter kept a shoebox of the mud-stained notebooks. Ren had crawled more of Mammoth than most rangers ever see, and she treated the cave the way sailors treat the sea, with love and without 1 ounce of trust. Mammoth Cave runs more than 420 miles of surveyed passage, the longest cave on Earth, so large that entire rivers live inside it. The air holds 12 degrees Celsius all year, every day, forever. Her assignment that Sunday was modest: reshoot a survey loop off a gated side passage, 5 hours in, 5 hours out, with junctions marked by cairns, small stacked towers of stone that say, in the oldest language cavers have, "This way home." The first hours ran beautifully. Her instruments behaved, her numbers closed, and she moved through galleries of gypsum flowers with the easy rhythm of someone doing exactly what she was built for. At the third junction, she noted the cairn on the left wall, 7 stones tall, right where the old survey said it would be. She ate lunch sitting on a breakdown boulder, logged her shots, wrote, "Turning here, 1:40 p.m., in her notebook in her small, square handwriting, and started back the way she had come. 40 minutes into the return, that is the moment the trip stopped being routine, because at a fork she did not remember, a second cairn stood waiting, and she followed it into a passage that had failed to appear on any map she carried. Some earlier visitor, decades gone, had stacked stones at the wrong opening, and the cave had patiently kept the lie. The passage forked, then forked again, 5 openings wearing identical shadows. By hour 6, her going home line was gone. She was lost. Worse, trapped. 400 miles around, 1 headlamp left. So she did the hardest thing in caving: nothing. She sat down, clicked her light off to save it, and let the biggest darkness in North America close over her like water. Now the second clock started. 12 degrees of cold will kill a still human in damp clothes. A resting body surrenders roughly 1 degree of core heat every 2 hours, sliding toward hypothermia in the dark. Wren knew the arithmetic. She had taught it to trainees. She put on every layer, pulled her knees inside her jacket, and began the long work of spending heartbeats slowly. In the black, time went strange and almost kind. She heard the river somewhere below, a soft, gentle sound like a house settling, and she caught herself thinking, absurdly, that the dark had a texture. Velvet, she decided, and that Tomas would laugh at her for surveying it. Then hour 20 arrived. The freezing dark got a grip, the shivering began, and the velvet turned back into cold. On the surface, her overdue alarm had already worked. Marcus Boone, the regional cave rescue coordinator, fielded 40 volunteers into the gated section by hour 15. They leapfrogged teams through the survey loop, rigged a Tyrolean over the river passage, dragged litter sleds through crawls with a scrape of aluminum on limestone, and chalked every junction they cleared. At hour 31, a team found her lunch boulder, turning here, 1:40 p.m., and the search snapped to the junctions behind it. Boone's own team reached the false cairn at hour 52 and understood it instantly. 2 stacked towers standing 10 meters apart, and one of them was a trap. They poured down the unmapped fork, shouting her name into openings that swallowed the sound whole. They found Wren at hour 61, seated against the wall with her notebook squared on her knees, her last entry timed at hour 55. Hypothermia had stopped her heart perhaps 4 hours before the first light reached her. She died roughly 200 meters from a junction the searchers had cleared. The pages held survey notes, a letter to Tomas, and one line for her daughter. The cave is not cruel, it is only honest. The part pulled the false cairn the same week, and survey teams remarked 40 junctions in that section, with reflective tags that no stack of stones can imitate. Her survey loop closed to within 3 centimeters, and her numbers, as always, were perfect. The longest cave on Earth. 420 miles of passage, 61 hours of searching, and 7 small stones stacked in the wrong doorway. The dive light Maya Reyes carried into Ginnie Springs on the night of August 14th, 2021, was borrowed from a man who had warned her twice about its corroded battery contacts. She took it anyway, 3,000 psi on her back, nobody waiting on the surface, a careful diver swimming into the clearest water in Florida on borrowed time. Maya was 29 years old, an open water instructor who had taught more than 600 students and spent nearly every weekend of 4 summers in Florida's springs. Her sister called the springs Maya's second house, and her logbook agreed, page after page of the same coordinates in the same neat hand. She was Cavern certified, careful by reputation, and that August night she wanted one quiet dive with no students, no chatter, just her, the water, and the moon. Ginnie Springs pours 72-degree water up through the Santa Fe River forest, so transparent that divers joke the fish are flying. The cavern beneath it is a stone ballroom the size of a house, daylight blue by afternoon and ink black by 10 at night, guarded by a famous sign that reminds divers there is nothing in a cave worth dying for. Her plan was simple and legal. 40 minutes inside the cavern zone, single tank, stay in sight of the opening. On the steps, she checked her gauge, 3,000 psi exactly, and slipped under. The first 20 minutes were the dive she had come for. The spring ran silk smooth and empty. Her beam cut a clean white road through the ballroom, and the limestone threw it back in soft curves. She rolled onto her back beneath the entrance and watched her own bubbles climb toward a wobbling silver coin of moonlight. Her gauge read 2400 psi, right on plan, everything on rails. At minute 22, the dive stopped being hers, because the borrowed light flickered once, clicked like a bone snapping, and failed. The corroded contacts the owner had warned her about had finally let go. 40 feet down, at night, in a room with one exit. Her backup light lasted 11 seconds, then browned out to a dying ember. The light failed. Then the backup failed. Total black. No up, no down. Night outside meant no glow to swim toward. The entrance that saves cavern divers every afternoon had simply stopped existing. Panic arrived on schedule, a fist around the ribs, and her air proved it. The gauge she could no longer read was draining a third faster with every heaved breath. She caught the panic the way she taught students to, one hand flat on the stone, holding, breathing, counting the exhale down from 4. Then she made herself the stillest thing in the spring and hunted for the only signpost left, the water itself. Then she reached to reset her hold and lost her grip on the world entirely. She had drifted 2 fin kicks off the stone, and for a long half-minute, she hung in space that had no walls at all, arms sweeping slow circles until her knuckles finally cracked against limestone. Ginnie's vent pushes millions of gallons a day outward, always outward, a current as steady and gentle as a sleeping animal's breath. Face into it, and the flow becomes a calm hand on the sternum, pointing home. She hung there in the dark and let the spring hold her, almost peaceful, almost still. Then her regulator caught hard on a breath. The tank was heading for empty, and blind meant slow, and slow meant drowning arithmetic. She moved along the wall, one handhold at a time, against the flow, fingertips scraping limestone, gauge unreadable, counting 41 breaths and refusing to guess what number they ended at. The rock curved, the current sharpened, and her hand found the lip of the opening. Maya surfaced at first light on the last honest breaths of the tank. 600 psi burned to nearly nothing, under a sky going pale gold above the cypress trees. Denny Calhoun, the campground's morning safety officer, had spotted her lone truck at dawn and was already wading in. He hauled her onto the steps, stripped her rig, wrapped her in a towel, and radioed off the rescue call-out, while she sat there laughing and shaking at once. She had spent almost 9 hours in or beside the water for a 40-minute dive, most of them clinging to stone in the dark, breathing like an accountant. The borrowed light that failed went back to its owner in a plastic bag, with the corroded contacts circled in marker. Maya still teaches, and she still dives Ginnie, the clearest water in Florida, by daylight with 2 lights she owns and a buddy she trusts. On night 1 of every course, she now passes around a plastic bag, lets her students turn the dead light over in their hands, and tells them what borrowed gear really costs. That she paid for one careless evening with a whole night of borrowed time.